So yesterday, the Packers had a very poor performance against the New York Giants on defense, with Tommy DeVito, third stringer, coming in, leading them to a game-winning drive, kicking a field goal as time expired to beat the Green Bay Packers. And Kurt Benkert, former Packers QB, who I always like to see what he has to say about the Packers, considering he was there in the locker room in Green Bay. He has a lot of knowledge about things in Green Bay and the NFL in general, being a former NFL quarterback. But here's what he tweeted on X in the past few hours. He said this: anyone that plays QB is just praying a defense plays this far off in a 2-minute drill. And you can see in the first picture here underneath, he shares the entire minute and 30 seconds of the final drive for the Giants. And I'll show you a few clips of the start of the play to show you just how far these corners were lining off. But in a game situation where you have Tommy DeVito back there at quarterback, and all the Giants need to do is to get into field goal range, I was shocked watching it that we were playing so far off and just allowing those underneath throws, because we basically just allowed Tommy DeVito to do whatever he wants, to check it down underneath and consistently move the chains with only a minute 33 left. And you could tell Kurt Benkert himself, he and other QBs, he's saying this is exactly what we would want. So Joe Barry sort of showing something that is seemingly a quarterback's dream when it comes to 2-minute scenario, having the secondary play so far off, giving you easy completions, which allows you to easily move the ball on the field. And this has been something that has happened in Joe Barry's time for a long time. There's been so many instances, not only in big game moments, but lots of other times where it's, 3rd and 10, corners playing like 10 to 15 yards off, guy gets an easy first down. And he probably has a reason for doing it, I would assume, because he wouldn't do this if he didn't have some kind of reason. And we know that Joe Barry likes to play, sort of keep things in front of you, don't want to allow those explosive plays. But in instances here where, you can't let them get into field goal range, I don't understand why we weren't playing some more aggressive kind of football. And that doesn't mean you need to line up, right on the line and, have the risk of a guy beating you deep. But maybe just playing a little closer so they can't get those easy underneath completions. Let me show you here the start of each of these plays to show just how far these guys were lining off. I can't show the whole clip because of copyright things, but I can show you the picture. So here's 1st and 10. You can see Carrington, I'm pretty sure that's him at the top there, maybe 10 or so yards off. They had some kind of underneath completion on that play. The next one, 2nd and 5, Carrington even farther off. You can see Keyshawn Nixon at the bottom there, pretty far off. I think that's Ballantyne at the bottom, pretty far off. And the Packers were just sort of begging DeVito to, hit someone underneath, move the ball 5-10 yards pretty easily, and that's what they did. Here is here's 1st and 10 with 53 seconds left. For some reason, this play, they cut off the start of it. But you can see at the top, I'm pretty sure that's Carrington still. And this was like an easy completion to the receiver underneath there for maybe 8 yards. And just when you have 50 seconds left and they're getting close to field goal range, I don't know how you call something like that. I just don't understand it. I would like to hear Joe Barry's explanation. We probably won't be hearing that. And then here's the final play before they got into field goal range. Not playing as far back, luckily, but it didn't really matter. That's where Keyshawn Nixon got burned. He was playing man, I believe. I think everyone was lined up in man, but definitely Keyshawn Nixon. The receiver, doesn't move inside, cuts outside. Keyshawn Nixon doesn't stay with him. They get into field goal range, and that was pretty much it for the rest of the game. But just to see something like this, and you hear a former quarterback in Kurt Benkert also pointed out, sort of agreeing with the sentiment that, how in the world could you be playing so far off in the final game situation when the Giants have Tommy DeVito back there? It would be one thing maybe if you have an elite quarterback that you're more afraid of, but you just sort of gave easy completions to Tommy DeVito. And I want to show you a few other things about this Packers defense that I found interesting. Here's a tweet from Andy Herman who says, the Packers have allowed between 19 to 24 points to 7 of their last 8 opponents. Brett Rippon's Rams being the exception. Doesn't matter if it's Mahomes, Goff, Pickett, DeVito, Cousins, Wilson, it's going to be about 19 to 24 points. They've also allowed 17 to 25 points in 14 of their last 16 games. And that's just, a very interesting stat that pretty much in those games were in a certain point threshold where maybe you're not allowing 30 plus points. The Packers haven't really, maybe besides the Lions game. But the fact that Mahomes does similar things to what, Pickett does against you or DeVito, the fact that DeVito and the Giants somehow play better against the Packers defense is honestly mind-boggling. I don't know how that works. I think one of the things, if you look at last night, where the Packers were worse than they had been a majority of the season, was in the red zone. The Packers' red zone defense has been one of the things that I think have allowed them to have one of those top scoring defenses, because they've only allowed allowed touchdowns 51.1% of the time in the red zone, which is 10th best in the NFL. And so even though the Packers allow the 19th most yards per game, because they make those red zone stops, that's why they're scoring. They allow less scoring because if you look at the game against the Chiefs, their first 2 drives end as field goals. Clearly, if those are touchdowns, the game looks a little bit different. And in this game, the Packers only had 1 stop. Only 3 of the 4 times the Giants scored in the red zone. So that was a big difference maker in this game. And when you don't have the Packers playing very good situational football, then it's tough to win these kind of games. And so when you look at the Packers defense, it's been a confusing time, to be completely honest, because for weeks and weeks, the Packers have been in close games. The defense has done enough to allow the Packers offense to win games, playing really well against the Lions, against the Chiefs. But still, we have the 31st ranked rushing defense in the NFL. And I just do wonder, with the defense playing as they have, do we really ever have a chance? Let's say we make the playoffs this year, years in the future. If we're still allowing 31st in rushing yards allowed per game, is this a formula for the Packers to find success and make it to a Super Bowl? I just don't know about that. I feel like I've come around a little bit more to Joe Barry just because the Packers haven't allowed a ton of points. They've been, before this game, they were 9th best scoring defense in the NFL. So I was sitting back there and saying to myself, well, teams pretty easily move the ball down the field. The Packers are somewhat good in situational football. If this is what leads the Packers to being a top 10 scoring defense right there on the cusp of that, then okay. I mean, if Joe Barry can do this consistently and we can play as we have against the Chiefs, Lions, then I guess if it gets the job done. But then you have a game like this where Tommy DeVito leads a game-winning drive on you and you have your corners playing so far off, and that's where it makes me reconsider if I really want Joe Barry here for the long haul. I was sort of looking at the sentiment around Twitter of Packers fans, and doesn't seem like many people want Joe Barry to stay around. And I'm not going to say that, I'm going to shift my mindset to having Joe Barry be fired after one poor performance. But considering over his years here, there have been many instances where it really makes you scratch your head. I will definitely be thinking long and hard about that. But I do think the Packers defense has played pretty well most of the season. When you look at scoring, when you look at red zone defense, and it's slightly confusing as to, the teams moving the ball in the field so easily, and yet the Packers still are 11th best scoring defense in the NFL. So it's not like they've been terrible when it comes to that. One final thing I want to show you is here. I want to look at the DVOA rankings, which I found the definition here for those unfamiliar. So DVOA is a stat. It says it's defense adjusted value over average. Calculates a team's success based on the down and distance of each play during the season, then calculates how much more or less successful each team is compared to the league average. And so here's a tweet from Wendell Ferreira who says, Joe Barry's track record as DC, DVOA. Lions in 2007, 30th. 2008 Lions, 31st. Washington 2015, 21st. Washington 2016, 25th. Packers 2021, 22nd. 2022 Packers, 20th. And through 14 weeks this season, 28th in DVOA. So some of these advanced stats don't like the Packers defense. Somehow Joe Barry has managed to get by, and this defense has managed to do enough to win games. And so I think you have to give him credit in that sense, because 1 week after keeping Mahomes pretty much in check, I'm not going to act like that game didn't happen and just, throw Joe Barry under the bus completely. But when you have a performance like this against an offense that just has not been good, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and you don't find a way to contain DeVito, who had 10 carries for 71 yards. Clearly, there were lots of issues here. And when you have a performance like this against a weak team, a backup quarterback, when you have a drive like you did on the final drive, it does make you wonder when it comes to moments in the future. Let's say Joe Barry stays around and the Packers offense continues to play well. We make the playoffs. Do you trust Joe Barry if the defense needs to get a stop, needs to force a team to not kick a field goal? I just don't, because we saw how easily they can move the ball down the field. So I'm still debating, do I want Joe Barry? Do I not want Joe Barry? Haven't fully made up my mind, because there has been lots of good that has happened this season with the defense. I guess I do wonder, if we had a different defensive coordinator with the talent we have here, would this defense be dramatically better? It's possible. It's hard to really know for sure, but I would just assume when you see performances like this, that, adding a new defensive coordinator, I would have it hard to not think that this defense would take some kind of step forward. But we'll see how the defense performs the rest of the season. Hopefully, it will be better than it was in this game against the Giants. But that is all I have for this video. If you want more Packers content like this, feel free to subscribe down below. Feel free to comment your thoughts as well in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys next time.